The Gallipoli campaign was a pivotal battle, and a story of mismanagement and nationalism that led to the country we know today as Turkey. This is the story of a war that proved instrumental in the early developments and alliances of World War I. The story of the risky attacks, the unnecessary casualties, and the mistakes made by the Entente powers that lead to a tragic defeat, but also the birth of a new wartime nation. This is the story of the Gallipoli campaign. In the northwestern side of modern-day Turkey, there lies a city on the Dardanelles Strait by the name of Gallipoli, but also known as Gallipoli. Today, there lies a beautiful city home to nearly 32,000 Turkish citizens. But in 1915, British leader Winston Churchill saw an opportunity to solve all his problems at the same time. The Dardanelles Strait would connect Russia to the rest of the Entente through the Black Sea, but also provide a path seaward to Constantinople, which could lead to the taking down of the fluttering Ottoman Empire. Lieutenant General Sir Ian Hamilton given command of the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, which meant he oversaw the campaign against the Ottoman Empire. The British 29th Division, the Royal Naval Division, the French Oriental Expeditionary Corps, 29th Indian Brigade, and the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, ANZAC, were all put into the campaign in Gallipoli. Plans were made for a naval expedition to seize the Dardanelles in February and March 1915. They were not ready for the strategic defense led by German and Ottoman generals Otto Lehmann von Sanders and Mustafa Kemal. Sir Ian Hamilton and Winston Churchill felt confident in the attack and sent majority outdated ships, few modern ships, and 35 fishing trawlers who were given the job to take out the mines. The attack took place on February, where Allied ships were successful in bombarding the enemy's outer forts at the start of the strait. This allowed the main naval attack to take place in March, as the ships sailed into the strait where they got bombarded by the howitzers. The fishing trawlers were brought in to sweep the mines, but retreated due to the artillery fire. To keep the momentum, they continued to push in, and one of the naval ships got heavily damaged and pulled back. In 2 minutes, only 10% of the crew was alive. Then, 2 more ships hit mines and sunk. With their best ships still to be deployed, they fell back. So, what were the key reasons for this bold strategy? At the time, not only were both sides looking for a decisive battle to swing the tides of the war, but at the same time, Russia was in desperate need of food, supplies, and relief in their large war against the German forces. At any point, the Entente powers were worried that Russia wouldn't be able to continue fighting and would exit the war, which would almost certainly result in a large Western Front loss without Germany's forces being divided. With Russia demanding more resources and more urgent action from the Entente powers, Britain decided that bruising through the Dardanelles Strait was the only option. In April, the Allies made a new plan to invade through the land. They began the land attack by dropping troops at Morto Bay, where they faced little resistance, but failed to capitalize on the situation. Nearby the main attack near Cape Helles faced heavy defenses of thick barbed wire and good positioning on the hills by the Turks, decimating the Allied forces. But worse news were to come as the Anzacs, which were the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. They landed further up north than intended. Instead of fighting on the flat land of Gaba Tepe, they had to fight up the cliffs of what is now called Anzac Cove. The battlefield favored the defenders, as the Anzacs could not push up the hills as the Turks kept launching counterattacks. Both sides faces heavy casualties, but the Turks gave up virtually no ground in a victory. The Allies were losing, but a new hope rose as Sir Hamilton was given 6 more divisions to use. The plan was to drop troops at Suvla Bay, which would have much more favorable layout. However, they lost the element of surprise because they were waiting for artillery to arrive, and the Turks took the high ground. The Anzacs were able to capture key position, but were immediately pushed off by a huge wave of Turks. During the next 8 months of the Gallipoli campaign, the Allies could still not push up and take the Dardanelles Strait. This was due to the lack of supplies and energy, as well as brutal tactical mistakes, such as the overextending of limited manpower and underestimating the Turks on the high ground. Even when the Allies tried to supply the troops, they were unable to because it was in the line of sight by the howitzers. As summer came by, the flies and heat got to the troops, spreading diseases. This was hard as they did not have energy to make an attack or defend the trenches. With 8 months of casualties adding up, something had to be done. After nearly a year of warfare in Gallipoli, without any sign of an end or a victory, the war of attrition was becoming too costly for the Entente powers, who required every available resource on the Western Front. Thus, on October 11, 1915, Ian Hamilton was asked by the House of Lords if an evacuation from Gallipoli would be plausible. The next day, he would respond that an evacuation was, quote, unthinkable. In response, Lord Kitchener would remove Ian Mitchell from his position, and with the new General Monro would order evacuation. On December 13th, after 8 months of brutal warfare with no end in sight, detailed evacuation plans were ordered. By January 9, 1916, the Entente soldiers, or at least those remaining, were out of Gallipoli. Gallipoli is largely viewed as a contributor to the length of the First World War, with the loss of resources, manpower, and the lack of a supply route to Russia, causing the Entente powers to focus on the Western Front and having to go through many brutal battles of attrition that would last until Germany finally cracked. However, it also contributed to the Entente powers bringing Australia and New Zealand into the war, which would help the Entente powers. In total, the Ottoman Empire faced similar losses in manpower, but the failure and lack of strategy make it a clear loss for the Entente, which they had to overcome to win the war. The impacts of Gallipoli are one of the first examples brought up when considering nationalism and national identity. This battle, more than anything, wasn't a battle between the Turks and Entente powers, but a battle of nations proving their worth. For the Turkish, it was a victory that proved that the Ottoman Empire was still powerful enough to stand up against the British, as well as all the Entente powers. Even with the Ottoman Empire ceasing to exist moments later, not only is Turkey still here today, but they view the ability to win such a battle to be a point of pride for the nation. This nationalism shines through in the conversion of the Hagia Sophia, where in July of 2020, the famous museum valued by Turkish citizens would be reconverted to a mosque, essentially Muslim church, which demonstrates the national identity and national religion of Islam, which the events of the Gallipoli campaign cultivated. While this conversion sparked controversy towards the exclusion of non-Islam Turks, the national identity and pride of the Turkish society would stand by the change. Today, the Gallipoli campaign is also viewed as an important event in Australia's history, as a turning point in their independence and contributions to their allies' conflicts. In Turkey, has achieved mythic status in the ability to fend off the world's largest empire at the time. All in all, despite a clear victor in the Battle of Gallipoli, a century later we can see strong connections to the patriotic pride of these participating nations, and only now see the ripple effects on the histories of the Australian, New Zealand, and Turkish sides. Nationalism is what sparked the beginning of the First World War, and it's only right for it to be a major part of one of its battles. This demonstrates the nuance in how differing sides view a battle years after it concludes, and the pride that nations and civilians have that leads them to willingly sacrifice their lives for the sake of their countries. It's to protect, enhance, and become the national identity that is so valuable to the citizens of a proud country. The end.